All right, let's turn now to Washington, where U.S. President Donald Trump had a strong reaction to a question posed to him in the Oval Office. The U.S. administration's trade policy and ensuing reversals of those policies has created unpredictability for investors and upheaval in the markets. And now, well, investors have a new phrase to describe that, and it ain't complimentary for Trump. The CBC's Katie Simpson is here to break it down, because nobody loves a good nickname like Katie Simpson. So, Katie, walk us through the new phrase and Trump's reaction to it.
Yeah, it certainly led to one of the more interesting moments in the Oval Office today. Donald Trump was asked by a reporter what he thinks of this phrase that is sort of buzzing around Wall Street. And it's called taco trading, or a taco trade. It stands for Trump always chickens out. Taco. It was coined by a journalist for the Financial Times, and it has to do with Donald Trump's trade policy, a pattern where he makes a big tariff threat, either imposes it or gets to the brink, pauses it, maybe pulls it back a little bit, or doesn't implement it, or implements it and then sort of changes course. And the pattern it has on the market. So just think about it. And all the examples we've seen, including some with Canada, Donald Trump makes a big tariff threat. Investors take him seriously. You see markets going down. And then when Trump eventually pulls back or retreats or changes course, that's when markets rebound. It happened again this weekend. So on Friday, Donald Trump threatened to hit the EU with a 50% tariff. And then over the holiday long weekend, he relented. On Friday, stocks closed lower in the United States. By Tuesday, when stocks reopened, the stock markets reopened after the Memorial Day long weekend, that is when stocks surge, increase. I think they closed 700 points higher, the Dow did. So it's a pattern, and we've seen it sort of in more prolonged situations. If you think about so-called Liberation Day, when Donald Trump threatened to impose tariffs on basically almost every single American trading partner, he eventually paused it, relented, but he still put in a baseline tariff there. And so Donald Trump was asked about this taco, Trump always chickens out, in the Oval Office today. And as you can imagine, he had a bit of a heated response.
Because I gave the European Union a 50% tax tariff, and they called up and they said, please, let's meet right now. Please, let's meet right now. And I said, okay, I'll give you till June 9. I actually asked them, I said, what's the date? Because they weren't willing to meet. And after I did what I did, they said, we'll meet anytime you want. And we have an end date of July 9th. You call that chickening out, but don't ever say what you said. That's a nasty question. Go ahead. To me, that's the nastiest question.
Trump also aggressively defended his strategy here, saying, listen, the United States is the hottest country in the world. It's something he said ever since his trip to the Middle East, saying that, 6 months ago, he says the United States was stone cold dead. So Donald Trump definitely disagrees with that, even though if there is a pattern that journalists as well as investors are certainly starting to notice and trying to adapt to and either sort of brace for or endure.
With all of this, too, though, Katie, there's some nuance that should not be missed here, right? Let's make sure we don't miss it.
Yeah, so taco is sort of a broad statement. That is such a silly thing to say. What is this? What is this? This is such a ridiculous thing. Yeah. No, but the thing is, it's like this is the moment we're in, right? But taco is a broad phrase. And the thing is, even though it's like Trump always chickens out, while Trump may change course and reverse or sort of shift his policy or reduce the threat, generally what we have seen here is that the United States trading partners do end up with some kind of tariff, even if it's not as bad as originally promised. So when you say Trump always chickens out, you sort of have to have a big caveat there. And Canada's sort of seen it. It's the prime example of this. Donald Trump originally threatened to put 25% tariffs on basically all goods coming to the United States. He threatened and then he delayed. He threatened, then he imposed, and then he put in carve-outs. But Canada is still getting hit by tariffs on steel and aluminum. And, the border security tariffs are there. But then again, there are carve-outs. Look at other United States trading partners, on so-called Liberation Day, when Donald Trump put tariffs on countries based on what he described as fairness. Even though those huge numbers that he threatened on the first day were paused, Donald Trump did come back and say, okay, everyone's going to be hit by that 10% global baseline tariff. So even if Donald Trump is changing or reversing course, or it's not as bad as the original threatened, there are still nightmare tariffs that countries and business owners are trying to navigate here. And that even though, that this phrase, this blanket phrase is one thing, and it's getting a lot of attention on Wall Street. This is why we're talking about it so much, that investors are talking about it, and it finally made its way to the Oval Office, and Trump did not quite like it. But still, keep in mind, even if Trump sort of reduces the threat or whatever the original sort of promise is, these countries, these businesses are still dealing with tariffs that weren't there in the first place and that remain incredibly difficult to navigate.
All right, Katie, thank you so much. The CBC's Katie Simpson in Washington, Taco, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you.